Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Cracking Addiction. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and tonight we have with us Mr. Stephen Hurd. Now, Steve is an expert in family violence. So, Stephen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Fergal. Great to be here.
And I think what we really want to do in this first episode is to kind of introduce the subject and then explain to viewers and listeners that we're going to do a series of episodes exploring all of the facets of family violence. So first of all, what is family violence?
Well, we'll start at the pointy end. I guess it's a whole series of behaviours, really centred on the idea of power and control, where one party wants power over another party. In other words, one member of a couple wants to control, dominate, and make their own, I guess, their partner. It's most evident in intimate partner settings. I mean, men and women, de facto married, whatever, or same-sex relationships as well. But not just those relationships, other familial relationships, other family-based relationships too, where one member wants to have power over another.
Yeah, that's a very good way of thinking about it, isn't it? It's power and control, but yeah. And what puts you in the position of being able to talk about this? Why are you here?
Well, that's a great...
That's another pointy-ended question, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are two parts to that. There's the professional part to it, and I guess there's the personal part to it as well.
All right. Tell us more.
And the professional part says, well, I'm now reached a status of being called a family violence advisor in the Drug and Alcohol Agency in which I work. And that role's about building capability and capacity around responding to family violence, but in a drug and alcohol setting. That's great. Prior to that, I've had about 10 years experience in men's behaviour change. Some people might know something called the Duluth model, coming out of Minnesota in America. And here in Melbourne, Victoria, we use that basic framework in group settings to engage men who've been identified as using violence towards their female partners to take responsibility for their behaviour. And I guess the reason I got into that was sort of personal reasons. Right? We've all got our own life history. We've all got our own lived and living experience of what we do. And I guess I came to a point in my work experience, I wanted to do something of value rather than commercial work. And this really intersected really nicely. The opportunities arose to intersect what I know as a lived experience of family violence through the previous 50-odd years, and then really wanted to capitalise on that to think I could make a difference.
So really your interest in family violence really has started out with your experience dealing with men's behavioural change projects, yeah?
That's right.
Right. So I suppose it would be useful idea to think about or to talk about really men's behavioural change programs. Now, I think if I said to you anger management classes, you would rile against that, I would imagine. Let's start off with explaining the difference between an anger management class and men's behavioural change programs. Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Anger management was big in the 80s, I guess, and 90s. Still is to some degree. With the idea of saying, well, if a person can control their anger, well, then they won't get violent.
Yeah.
And so the strategies are around emotional regulation and in the moment type of time out, being able to stop, think and act, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So in the moment kind of strategies, which, may or may not work. in given different settings. Road rage is probably a good one. Can we stop and think and then act accordingly when the guy in front of us cuts us off? So that's that model of anger management or behaviour change, I guess. Well, it's not actually behaviour change. But when it comes to relationships, it's not quite that simple. Because what they've found is the key drivers in family violence is gender related. What my beliefs are around the other person, or the gender around the other person, what I project onto the other person. And typically these are behaviours associated with men trying to control their female partners. So behaviour change is more about getting to the belief systems so that averts that sort of cognitive trail of thinking that then leads me to a point of being able to justify my use of violence towards the other person.
So let's talk about that cognitive pathway. Can you give us an example of the cognitive pathway that leads to family violence? Just one example.
Let's say I'm out at the nightclub with my girlfriend. May not even be my wife, just my... Let's say I don't have a wife, I only have a girlfriend, and I've taken her out to the nightclub. And we're having a good time, had a few drinks, and a lot of light, a lot of noise, a lot of people. I go to the bathroom and then come back and she's talking to some bloke at the bar. And then I think, far out, what's going on here? Is this what's been going on? She's just talking to these guys, when my back's turned, and cheating on me. Is this what's really going on? And all these sort of thoughts start to sort of come on. You might drag in, well, this happened before too. Or, I know she's been lying about something and this is probably it. And all these thoughts become sort of stacked in my thinking. And then by the time I've walked from the bathroom to the bar, my heart's racing, my blood's boiling. I've got probably clenching my fists, just sort of trying to diffuse the energy a bit. And then what happens after that? Well, we probably won't talk about that. It's that build-up of those thoughts that then lead into an area of dangerous thinking, or they support dangerous thinking.
Well, you see, I think it's slightly different. I would describe it slightly more than that. I mean, I think we've all got triggers in our life, right? We all feel hurt and rejected, and we all experience pain. And we let's face it, in that example, let's reflect on that example. We've all had our hearts broken. We've all had relationship issues. But for me, it goes back to what you said. It's coercion and control. It's as if, my partner is my property, and I'm allowed to do with my partner as I see fit. And if what I see fit involves punishment or control of this property that I own, then I can exert my rights upon that property. It's not just a trigger, isn't it? There is a whole thinking behind, I'm allowed to do this.
That's right. No, you.
What do you think?
I think, you're spot on. It's a different level. It's a different level. It's a more of an ongoing, insidious level of a sense of entitlement around, I own this piece of property, like you say. I've got rights over it. And there are social sort of cues I can probably pull on that help support that thinking too. Me as a man, I'm probably the breadwinner. I'm the decision maker at home, and therefore what I say goes. And so I'm
a man's man.
Yeah, my friends are too.
Yeah.
And my friends tell me I am too. My friends don't like me to be under my partner's thumb, that's for sure. And I like to tell them I'm not.
And I need to show everyone that I'm in control.
That's right. And she does what I say when I say it. Otherwise, there's consequences.
Otherwise, there's trouble at home.
Trouble at home. When we get home between the four walls of the house, that's when family violence is typically enacted in the secrecy of the home.
Yeah. One of the other things that really struck me as interesting is that I've seen so often these adverts on TV or billboard posters about how, if my home team loses, then my wife is in for a belting. If the team that I identify with loses, do you know what I
I
mean?
know exactly what you mean. There's a lot of
Let's talk about that.
there's a lot of observational research around big sporting events and the increase in police call-outs after that.
Yeah.
Due to
The advert goes, "What time's kickoff?"
I haven't actually seen that, but that's interesting.
Oh, that's a UK thing.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it. Let's flip it a little bit too, and I'll add to it. It's not so much about whether. What do you think of this? What do you think of this thing? It's the research really points to it. It doesn't actually matter if my team wins or loses.
It's the emotional arousal
And what else goes with it?
and the booze
And then what else goes with it?
and the drugs. The booze, the drugs,
and the viewer, the supporter, feeling entitled to do things.
Yeah.
If the team loses, I'm going to get angry and mad. If the team wins, I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to celebrate, and everyone's going to celebrate with me.
And woe betide you if you don't want to celebrate.
That's exactly right. And what else is going on for the family at the time? The kids need to still be put to bed.
Yeah, the dishes need to be done.
The dishes
Kids need to be fed, bed.
Rubbish bins need to be put out.
You can't stay up all night boozing because your partners might be working at 5 a.m. the double shift to support the family. One final point. We need to wrap up this first episode, but you did mention the Duluth model. Let's just quickly talk about the Duluth model.
Okay. It's been around since the 80s. There's a lot of family violence work's been stems from the 80s. That's when movements sort of started to think that there's this other thing going on at home that we need to look into. Women are coming and telling their doctors or their priests or other notable sort of social contacts they've got that bad things are happening at home. And as we can probably recall, it wasn't often believed. And so it was now thought of to actually respond to that, to these women's stories. And there's a town in Minnesota, in America, called Duluth. And they have really taken the bull by the horns, not just in that men's behaviour change example I mentioned, but a whole of community response. Police, courts, what else is there? Probably education systems, family violence services, non-family violence services, all the other services, mental health, drug and alcohol, etc. But an all of community response, and they've been doing that since the 90s. Yeah. And men's behaviour change is the way to engage the man in that invitational way to offer support, treatment, if you will, around their behaviour. But that doesn't work for all men. Not all men are interested in that. And so other responses are put in place. And so the understanding is that family violence is around the man's behaviour, not about the woman needing to leave or to make change herself. So that's probably the entire model.
All right, Steve, we're going to have to wrap it up for today's episode, but I really hope that we can meet again very shortly. So thank you very much for your time and expertise.
Absolute pleasure, Fergal. Thanks very much.
That's all for today, folks. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and this has been Cracking Addiction.